the letter that shook a continent. Dear brothers in Nigeria, do you not see the chains merely polished to look like jewels? The envelope was thick, hand-delivered through diplomatic channels no one expected. It bore the seal of Burkina Faso, and inside was a handwritten letter, inked in defiance, soaked in urgency. It was signed by Captain Ibrahim Traore, the young revolutionary president of Burkina Faso. In it, he addressed not just Nigeria's government, but its people. His words were poetic yet surgical, fiery yet rooted in brotherhood. Your land is rich, your people gifted, but your mind is colonized. And that, the letter read, is the deepest form of slavery. The whisper of rebirth. The Nigerian president stared at the paper in silence. Around him, ministers debated, scoffed, worried. Is this a provocation? Asked one. No, whispered another older voice. It's a mirror. Traore's message wasn't just words, it was a call to introspection. He praised Nigeria's potential, its revolutionary spirit, its music, its youth. But he asked questions others feared to voice. Why must Africa's largest democracy depend on imported food when its soil can feed continent? Why do the children of warriors beg for loans from those who once enslaved their fathers? Why does Nigeria, with all her oil, shiver in darkness? His tone was not of condemnation, but of urgent love. We are not enemies. We are brothers drowning in the same river, pretending to drink from different cups. The voice of the streets. In Lagos, students began reading the letter aloud at protest grounds. In Kano, market women discussed its lines while selling tomatoes. In Port Harcourt, radio shows played its phrases between Afrobeats. Ibrahim Day talk sense, said a bike man. The boy get fire for Bell. The Nigerian elite laughed at first, but something began shifting. The letter had touched a nerve. It had articulated the silent pain of millions. A dinner of dissent. One evening, in Abuja, a former general invited a group of political thinkers and activists to a private dinner. He poured palm wine slowly. Traore has done in one letter what we have failed to do in 50 years, he said. He spoke truth, and he did not wait for approval. A young lawyer raised her glass. Maybe we need our own Ibrahim. Nigeria responds. 3 weeks later, in a move that stunned the world, Nigeria's government announced a summit titled Reclaiming the Future, a continental conversation. They invited not just ECOWAS leaders, but Pan-African youth, farmers, and poets. Traore was invited as keynote speaker. The world held its breath. In front of thousands, Traore stood. He wore simple fatigues. His voice was calm, almost too calm for the fire he carried. I did not come to insult. I came to awaken, he said. He spoke of Thomas Sankara, of Patrice Lumumba, of Fela. He reminded Nigerians that they were not just a country, they were a symbol. If Nigeria rises, Africa breathes. If Nigeria sleeps, Africa snores. The crowd erupted. The consequences of truth. Not everyone celebrated. Western analysts mocked the summit. Revolutionary romanticism, they said. Loans were threatened. Aid packages froze. But something far deeper had been unfrozen: dignity. Across West Africa, walls were repainted with terrace words. Stand up, or be stood on. And in Abuja, a new policy was announced. 70% of all government contracts must now go to Nigerian companies. The seed had taken root. The final whisper. Late one evening, in a darkened corridor of Aso Rock, a young intern found a second letter. It was unmarked and signed. Just one line written in neat cursive. The slave who loves his chain will never hear the song of freedom. The Nigerian government did not confirm or deny the source. But the next day, the president gave a speech unlike any other. We shall not be satellites, he said. We shall be stars, and Africa our sky. The cities that remembered. In the alleys of Ibadan, in the university lecture halls of Nsukka, in the ancient courtyards of Zaria, the story of Traore's letter became something more than a political gesture. It became folklore, repeated, remixed, remembered. Children played games shouting, "We know day beg again." Women stitched cloth-bearing phrases like, "Our soil, our soul, our sovereignty." Even Nollywood screenwriters began scripting fictional presidents modeled after the young Burkinabè leader. "What magic is this?" asked a bewildered foreign journalist in Lagos. "It's not magic," answered street poet, "it's memory returning home." The elders speak. In a dusty compound in Minna, a retired diplomat unfolded an old document. It was a speech draft written in 1979 by Murtala Muhammad, never delivered, silenced by bullets. As the elders gathered that night, they read it aloud again. "We dreamt of an Africa unshackled," one said, his voice thick with emotion. "But fear ate our dreams." "Then it's time to dream again," replied another. They sent a letter, not to the government, but to the people. A public statement signed by 200 retired generals, professors, civil servants, and farmers. It said simply, "The youth must lead, the old must guide, the West must watch, and the future must belong to us." The day the streets stood still. The morning of July 7th came with a strangeness no one expected. Markets slowed. Buses paused. Mosques and churches, without speaking to each other, held prayers for unity at exactly 9 a.m. In a spontaneous act of symbolic resistance, millions wore a green scarf and a black bracelet. Green for Nigeria, black for Africa. At noon, children across schools nationwide read out passages from Traoré's speech at the Continental Summit. A new anthem was born, not in music, but in conviction. The response from the shadows. But not all forces were silent. In hidden rooms across Europe and the United States, men in suits discussed the Nigerian problem. "He's stirring sentiment we buried decades ago," said one. "If this spreads, we lose influence over not just Nigeria, but all of ECOWAS." Leaked memos surfaced. Secret lobbying, offers of sudden investment, even promises of debt cancellation, if only the revolutionary fever would be allowed to pass quietly. But it was too late. The virus of dignity had already infected the bloodstream of the nation. Traoré's second message. Weeks later, the Nigerian president received a small package from Ouagadougou. No cameras, no protocol. Inside was a hand-carved statue, a lion carrying a cub on its back. A note was tied to the lion's mane. "Your people are the cub. You their back. Don't let the hunters tame them." The president smiled. "Tell him, the cubs are learning to roar." Policy and pain. Real change is never just speeches. Is sacrifice. Nigeria's decision to reduce dependence on foreign contracts meant international backlash. Investors pulled out. Sanctions were whispered. Trade slowed. But factories began to rise in Ogun. Farms in Benue received subsidies. Tech labs in Enugu opened. Unemployment dipped. Power supply stabilized. Inflation remained, but so did hope. It was hard, but it was real. The night they met. It wasn't televised. It wasn't even planned. In Accra, during an ECOWAS side meeting, Traoré and the Nigerian president met alone for the first time. They sat on a terrace under West Africa's humid sky. "I didn't think your letter would change so much," said the Nigerian leader. "I didn't write it to change you," Traoré replied. "I wrote it to remind you who you already were." They spoke for 3 hours. No translators. Just leaders. Just Africans. When they rose, they shook hands not as allies, but as brothers. The awakening. A year passed. Nigeria passed a bill mandating African history as a compulsory subject from primary school. Burkina Faso hosted the first Pan-African Youth Congress, co-sponsored by Nigeria. Ghana, Niger, Guinea, Mali, and others began reviewing old colonial treaties. It wasn't a revolution of guns, but of minds. And though the West frowned, the world watched with growing respect. Because something had awakened. When legends walk among us. One night, at a small community center in Jos, a boy held up a worn-out picture of Ibrahim Traore. "Is he a superhero?" he asked. His grandmother smiled. "No, my child. He's just a man. But when a man walks with truth, even legends follow his steps." Coming next on CurioSphere, the rise of revolutionary Africa, echoes from Mali, Guinea, and Niger.